Hello and welcome back to the Hot Pot. Carlo, thank you so much for joining. Can you introduce yourself and give a brief introduction?
Hi, what's up, everyone? My name is Carlo Patenia. I'm originally from the island of Guam, but I currently reside in San Diego, California. Super excited to be here today.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you. And yeah, I totally forgot that you are from Guam. And I think that kind of leads to my second question, kind of hearing about your family's immigration story or even your own and how you ended up in Guam and how you ended up in California and maybe where your family's from.
Of course, yeah. Well, I'm Filipino. My mom and dad migrated to Guam at a very young age, so I think they were both in elementary school, if I'm not mistaken, elementary, middle school. So they migrated at a very young age. So I kind of was born and raised on Guam. So it's been a very interesting experience navigating intersectionality between being Asian American with my Pacific Islander identity and how do I balance that and where do I find community. But yeah, that's where my parents are from, and that's where I was born and raised. So from Guam, I'm an islander.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but I was born and raised in Hawaii. My parents immigrated to Oahu when they were like in their mid-20s. And so we're both just first generation technically
Yeah,
in islands too. So like
yeah,
neighbors basically.
yeah. What the heck? I didn't even know that. That's really cool. Wow, the more you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Really want to hear what your upbringing was like in Guam. I know like growing up in Hawaii, it's a very different experience from being in the continental US. I'm sure Guam is very similar. So love to hear more about that.
Growing up in Guam, not a lot of people heard about Guam or hear about Guam growing up. A lot of the story and the narratives that I've been hearing is like, oh, like you're from Guam, so do you all wear like grass skirts or do you all build huts and villages, from the coconut trees around you? And that was like my initial experience of growing up as an islander. And I'm like, wow, we don't really cut trees. And like, well, yes, we do cut trees, like coconut trees to get coconuts, but obviously we were like everyone else where we have like regular housing and everything, but we weren't allowed to vote for president. So I always was feeling like a half citizen in terms of like being a US citizen, since I know like being on Guam automatically gets us US citizenship, but we were kind of restricted from doing a lot of the mainland things. That's what I mentioned, like voting for president or even like voting on like mainland policies. So I thought it was a very interesting experience growing up on Guam. The funny thing about being on Guam is like there's a running joke where like when I was younger, like things will come out in like mainland US like a few months, like a product or something or merchandise, and then we'll get it like a year later, like, oh, it's brand new, but then they would be like, no, they came out like a year ago or a few months ago. So it's always like a running joke, like, oh my gosh, we get everything secondary. But yeah, that's like a little part of my upbringing growing up on Guam. Obviously, like as far as like nationalities and ethnic backgrounds, I grew up with a lot of Micronesians, Polynesians, of course, Chamorros, who are the indigenous communities of the island itself. So, and there's a lot of Filipinos there as well. So, I didn't have a lot of experience growing up, but now like being out in California, there's so much like demographics of like, subgroups of Asian American, subgroups of like the Hispanic groups and everything. So like it definitely was a culture shock, but growing up Guam was like a little bubble. So I don't know if you relate, but like, in the island, like everyone knows everyone. So it's just like that was kind of cool, but getting out of Guam was very it was a culture shock because like you now get to experience like different people and like larger concentrations of like different opportunities. So I guess that's a little bit of what it was like growing up on island.
Yeah, I have a similar experience. I shared this previously, but like growing up in Hawaii, everyone kind of looks like you. Everyone has like a different ethnic background, but most people are Asian or they're Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander and they look like you, like this color of your skin, kind of that background and experience of living on the island is very similar. And then obviously I went to college in Indiana where it's predominantly white. And so I knew like obviously white people existed, but not necessarily in the volume that it did growing up. And so it, like what you mentioned, it was a culture shock and kind of seeing how I don't necessarily fit in, but knowing like I had that identity of growing up and understanding my culture and why it's so important. But explaining that to other people was a different story. So love to hear. I can see that you kind of have a similar experience. Love to hear how that was when you moved to California.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Everything you just said, I was like, wow, I resonate. Like growing up with like people with the same type of like they look like you, or like, we have the same like, color tone and like all this stuff. Like we're from an island, so we're like, ooh, the sun and the vibes and all that stuff. And then yeah, coming out here, you're like, yeah, you know about white people then, but then I went to a private school. I went to USD. So coming out here in San Diego, so like a majority of like, if anything, the student like population was white, so I was like definitely culture shocked. So I found a lot of community and like the Filipino groups up in like at my university, or like in my alumni at the university, and like for like the Pacific Islander groups like Poi, people the islands at my university. It was like kind of like a safe zone for me. It was very interesting because like a lot of people was assuming that just because I was from Guam, I was Chamorro, or I was like, they're like, oh, you're from Guam, that means you're Chamorro, right? You're like from Guam, that means like you're Guamese, or like there was like different types of terms for me, and I wasn't able. And at that time, I was kind of lost in my identity because I'm like, wait, like growing up on an island, I wasn't very connected to my Filipino identity, only because like I knew only of, like I grew up knowing like the Finohi Chamorro, which is like the Guam like the Guam like national anthem. So to be honest, I did not know like the Philippine national anthem. I did not grow up like, yes, like my family had a lot of like the Philippine customs and everything and all of that, the culture there, but I wasn't identifying it as like, oh, I'm Filipino, but I was like kind of combining it, like, oh, I'm an islander, like this is what I do. Like fiestas was our thing, because like in the fiestas, like, and like tomorrow there would be pansit, right? We have in Tagalog like Filipino, and like there's like in tomorrow like pansit. So like there was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know it was like, oh, that's a Filipino thing, or that's a islander tomorrow thing. Or like I just like, oh, it's an island thing, it's a Guamanian thing. So like when it came out here, like it was just a lot of like, how do I navigate spaces but being comfortable in my authenticity of like me? No, I am Filipino, I am Asian American, but I also am Pacific Islander. I'm like literally like, that's what I grew up with. Like culturally, I was like Guamanian, but ethnically like, and then like ethnically I was like Filipino. But then like it took me like a little while moving out here to really come into a balance of both, because I always felt scared to identify that, oh, like if I'm Asian American, like maybe I should just stay with Asian Americans, or like, oh, like, but, and then I would be on the Asian American side and be like, there would be like these certain things, like, well, I never grew up with that. And then I would go to like an HPI group, and I'm like, they would be like, this is this, and like, wait, I did grow up with that, so am I this then? So like I found it kind of difficult to find a space where in the middle. I wish there was like a group in the middle, like, oh yeah, like I migrated to, my parents like went to an island and from Asia, or like I don't know, something like that, like a similar experience that way I would have had a very like more comfortable experience navigating like communities out here. But yeah, it was kind of difficult coming out to California, because it was hard finding community space. But the more and more I felt more comfortable being confident, and my experience and like that defined who I am. That's when I was like, well, let me make my own space then, and let me find people that have kind of the same experiences and the same narrative, and then we, like us themselves, can create our own like community and talk about what we went through. Because at times I felt like, oh, no one understood me, or like no one really like got like my experience, like aside from the people who are from my island. So yeah, that was kind of my experience just coming out here to California from Guam. Difficult, but now very comfortable sitting and now meeting a lot of people that make it a safe space for me to talk about my experiences growing up in an island and being Asian American and Pacific Islander culturally.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate everything you mentioned because I really resonate with everything you shared. And, growing up in Hawaii and Guam are obviously very different, but similar in so many ways. And living on those islands, it's like a merging of different cultures, the Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiian, the Asian American, and obviously other cultures that have migrated to the islands that we came from. And so you have the experience like getting pancit, but then it's not always at a Filipino party, right? It could be at a whatever party. And that is something I also struggled with when I moved to the continental US, is that in Hawaii, and I'm sure in Guam, is that the services that are provided in the state on the island is provided to everyone. It's never a distinct group. It's never like, oh, this is only Asian American group serving. This is only Pacific Islander serving. This is only Native Hawaiian serving. It's like, we're going to serve everyone. And maybe our choice is to serve Native Hawaiians or Pacific Islanders, but it doesn't mean we're not going to serve Asian Americans. And that was something that I had to grapple with and kind of navigate when I moved here. And even in my current role, it's like, okay, there are organizations that exist that are only serving X, Y, and Z. But I grew up in a community that we're going to serve whoever we want because our cultures merge together, and because, you know, people hold different races sometimes, and you're not always one race, especially in the communities that we live in. And so really resonated with everything you said, because it's what I find that I gravitate towards, finding people who have similar experiences, like what you mentioned, is like, oh, whenever I share that I'm from Hawaii, it's such a connecting point when you tell someone that, because then it's like, oh yeah, I'm from Hawaii too. And it's like, oh, you understand, then like you don't have to explain as much. And then to the point of like what you mentioned about going to school and then not really connecting to your culture as much, I was in the same boat with you, because I grew up, you know, culturally Filipino. I grew up with all of these cultures. I've never had to explain what it meant to do X, Y, and Z. And so when people asked me when I was in college, they were like, oh, like, what are some traditions you have? And I would share it, and I was like, I don't know if it's necessarily like Filipino traditions, but it's traditions like culturally that we've had that come from like Japanese culture, sometimes Chinese culture, or whatever culture it may come from. So just really resonate with everything you said, and really glad that we could like kind of have that conversation, because I didn't know that about Guam, because obviously I'm not from there, but really appreciate you sharing that experience.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love this space. I feel so much of a connection to you. Oh yeah, but oh my gosh, yeah. What got me was like, yeah, what reminded me was like, you know, like when you're saying like the serving communities on our islands or something, like, yeah, like they don't, when they they don't separate the subgroups. They're like, okay, like on Guam, they're like, if you're from the village of Jigo, or like, because I'm from Jigo, like north side of the island, so like, if you're from the village of Jigo, like come through, we have a fiesta, come through, like do this, we're offering all of these things. And like if you're from the village of Dedo, there was never like a distinct of what group. So I was just like, wow, like it I don't know, that opened a lot of like unlocked memories of like how I grew up and like how I experienced it. Because I, for real, I did not like, it was just like, oh, like what village are you from? Like, oh, I'm from Dedo. Okay, cool. Like we never like really discussed like what cultural or ethnic background we are, because we were all like islanders, I guess. It was just like, we're from here, we live here, like therefore we're family. I think that was like the ongoing narrative that I was experiencing when I was growing up. So it definitely reminded me of that.
And I think that's just connection to land too, especially, well, I can't speak for your family and your ancestors, but like my ancestors were farm people, and they immigrated to Hawaii, or my great grandpa immigrated to Hawaii to work on the plantation. So there's that connection, a deep connection to land. And, you know, Philippines is an island too. And then our families migrated to an island as well. So very interesting connections.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love this.
We kind of talked about this a little bit already, is, you know, you lived on an island, you went to school at USD. So what are some stereotypes about your cultural identity that existed when you moved, or maybe growing up, and how has that impacted kind of how you navigate the world or just that situation?
So when I first moved out here, again, I think I mentioned earlier that I moved out here 2011, 2010. And at that time, I moved to LA and I was pursuing industry dancing. And when I would sit in communities where dancers and in a group, some stereotypes that I would experience is like, you know, you're from, like, I think what I mentioned earlier, like you're from Guam, that means that you don't really have like, when I was like in like LA, like all like what I mentioned was like, you know, how like, do they have real housing out there? Like, how does it look like? Like they weren't, I think with like stereotype is just like, I don't know, I feel like I was very like secondary. I don't know if there was really a stereotype, but more so like, I felt like I wasn't like a real like US citizen, because I was from Guam. Like, and then whenever someone, it was it was very interesting. Whenever we're in a group and someone was from Hawaii and I was from Guam, they were always like put, and nothing against my islander folks, I love my islanders. They will always like put us against each other. Like, oh, you're from Hawaii. Like, oh yeah, oh, like I love that. I love Hawaii. And then you're from Guam, and they're like, oh, that's cool. And then like they would just focus a lot on Hawaii, because obviously like how they like glamorize and make Hawaii this whole thing, which is again, it's problematic, right? Because of the whole thing that's going on. And but I'm just like, I just felt always like secondary, and I think it really impacted my voice in terms of how I was speaking in groups. I felt like silenced a lot and it dismissed, and like I felt like I would mention Guam and people wouldn't be, and I think it's like, it's not their fault. I think it's how I felt. It's just like they wouldn't, not growing up, now it's different, but like they wouldn't be interested in it or like want to know more about it. Oh, like you're from Guam, like where's that? And I'm gonna tell them like, okay, that's cool. And then they like move on. And like I felt like, okay, like do I really have a story? Does my experience isn't that unique, or like is my experience not as important as others, like as valued? But as time progressed, as time has moved on, I guess I turned that into like my superpower. So like now, like I make that like my X factor, my uniqueness. Like, so every space I'm in, like I like very vocal. Like now like in this position, like I tend to create safe spaces for anyone and everyone. Identify as queer, so like being like an islander, being like Asian American, and being queer, like I definitely find a lot of passion and providing space and like leverage of voices to like let people know, like use your voice, like that is your own platform and you are your own leader. Like just because like people don't think this or that, that doesn't make your idea or your like voice any less than others. So I utilized that experience of being pushed down and dismissed a lot when I first moved out here, to like now like a way to like really motivate and inspire myself and hopefully inspire others to really like be proud and like be like, you know, like have passion and love for where you're from, and make that be like, you know, your foundation in whatever platform or like org profession or like creative like platform you're on. But yeah, I think that's, I don't know if I answered that correctly, but and that's like my experiences of growing up being Guamanian out here.
Definitely, yeah, thank you. I love that. And you are creating those spaces in your current work. I mean, I see a little bit of it online, but that program, like the youth leadership program that you're helping lead, could you talk a little bit more about that? Because you're creating these spaces for youth, because, and what you're mentioning, like you're giving them a voice, you're amplifying the voices that they have, giving them the confidence that you kind of learn to build. And so love to hear more about that and how you're sharing kind of your gifts with everyone else.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry. I felt really warm and started reflecting on like my whole like upbringing, like all of that and like what I've been through. But yeah, so I'm currently a program coordinator at Appeal. I'm in charge of or not in charge. I'm currently creating or in developing and like helping create and push a group called United in Hope. So it's a leadership program, young adult leadership program. And this leadership program really is hoping, I'm really hoping that inspires like young adults nationally to really come through and, you know, be proud of whatever social justice passions that they're in, and then to really help connect them with each other and to help utilize like their special skills to really help again amplify their voices. But United Hope in general is a way to build a bridge to connect with each other, build relationships and connections. We just had our second leadership summit in Seattle, which had a lot. We had like almost 20 fellows at the summit. And a lot of them were like college students, a lot of them were like seniors, post-grad, freshmen. at UW or like elsewhere, and a lot of them are at CBOs. But it was it's a great opportunity for these young adults that want to become leaders and change makers in the community to really hone their voice and foundations and whatever they're practicing, whatever social justice they're practicing, social justice passions that they're interested in, and help them skill build and help them continue their connections and love for the community. So that's a little about or like kind of what United in Hope is, and I'm really hoping that it continues to grow and help young adults realize their power in the community.
Yeah, and amazing that you get to be part of building that community and making that space. I know I can tell that you're really passionate about this program and really creating that space and working with people to connect with one another. And I know you shared a little bit about your upbringing and kind of, where you are now, but is this something that you thought you would be doing, when you were in college, when you were experiencing all of these things growing up, or even when you transitioned from Guam to California? Was this something you envisioned doing, or was it kind of like your experiences that led you there?
That's a very good question. So in high school, I danced. So like a lot of the reason why I think I got into this work is because I was a dancer and I didn't have any space in high school to dance. Like in my high school, there wasn't any dance teams like that. It was all just like you have to pay to be like in like a community dance team or something, but there was no like entity where you could just like exist and dance with a group of people. So it started with me creating like my high school's first like dance group, and then I created that, and then I went to USD, and like there was no community that in a very white dominant like university, there was no community where there was a space where communities from different cultures and multicultural communities can, like brown and black folks, to come in and dance. So I created that, and I guess like I was like, whoa, I'm really good at creating safe spaces for like dance, and like and organically, like I was a cultural coordinator for like my Filipino organization, and I did like PCN, the Filipino Cultural Night. I'm a university, so I was just like, wait, I'm really good at creating safe spaces and for people to come through and talk and build story and like have social justice like involved. Like, why? Maybe I was thinking like I'm gonna be in a profession to do that, but I was like, maybe that can be a thing, because I'm a psych major, so I graduated with psych. So I was like, I'm gonna be a counselor, I'm gonna be like a therapist, blah, blah, blah. But organically, like after I guess graduated, like I found myself in spaces where I think I was getting called by the universe. I don't know, but it was just like, yo, like come through in this space. Like my first, like I guess organizing job out of college was like I was a community organizer for Social Advocates for Youth, and it was on a tobacco grant. It was a smoke-free tobacco-free in organizing the LGBTQI plus community. So I was like, wait, I identify as queer. Like I don't do tobacco, like stuff like that. I was like, maybe I can start like that. So organically I went in that, and I started organizing like grassroots with I did like artist building community, which is like a creative arts group here in San Diego, where I guess artists from like different mediums come through and they showcase their art. And I did like a dance thing, and I organized like different dancers from like different spaces, and we did like a little a showcase where which brought awareness like police brutality and like Black Lives Matter and all of that stuff. So I think organically I was like, wait, I'm really passionate about this, and I'm really good at like connecting, and I'm a community builder and I'm a people person. I was like, wait, maybe that can be a profession. And I think now I'm like now developing that sense of like, yes, this is a career, and this is it's cool because like I find so much love and passion in it, but I can also be in a space where I can grow professionally. So yeah, I think that's how it came to be organically.
Oh, yeah, no, I totally resonate with everything you said. I mean, everything is connected, right? Like there are things that we enjoy, like personally just enjoy, and being able to make that into a profession and making it fulfilling work. Like it's a skill, it's a gift to be able to have that opportunity. And I'm glad that, you found where you could grow professionally, but also still remain fulfilled and grow those kind of, not necessarily grow, but like fulfill what you've learned about yourself, and also just use those skills that you already have, because those are soft skills that you can't necessarily learn. It's like something you naturally have based off of your upbringing and experiences. And that is something very powerful. So really appreciate all the work that you do.
Oh, thank you, Princess. And I don't know, I just really appreciate this too. And I appreciate this space and being able to talk story like this, because I haven't really gotten the opportunity to talk about my upbringing, or like how it came to be, and like these experiences, and like intersectionality and identity. So again, I'm very grateful for this space and being able to tell my story.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful that you said yes. I think, yeah, because when we talk to people, our stories are so important. And usually, especially now that we're like in our careers and in the professional field, it tends to be like, oh, what are you working on now? What are you doing? But the passion and the drive comes from somewhere. And so that's why I really enjoy learning from you and learning from everyone else, is like, what actually brought you where you are today? Like, what actually was it? Your upbringing? Was it these experiences? And it's so powerful and so amazing to hear like where people came from and the experiences that they had, because it's like, this is why they're so passionate. And I was mentioning earlier that like, this is why I love our generation, is because now we're like, we have the experiences of our parents and kind of understanding what they went through, how they immigrated. And then we have our experiences of dealing with some of that kind of that, and but also bringing it into our own lives and how that impacts our work and ourselves. And so, yeah, I mean, these are stories that our ancestors may not have shared with us, but maybe have gone through similar things. And then those after us will probably go through similar things. And if our stories aren't shared in whatever platform they may be, it's like, where do they go? And so I really appreciate you just sharing your story, your upbringing, and how you ended up where you are.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm going to bring it back to kind of what you mentioned about intersectionality. And so you mentioned you grew up in Guam, you identify, culturally Pacific Islander, ethnically Filipino, but you also mentioned that you're queer. How does all of that coming together, does that, I guess, affect how you navigate the world, or how does that impact your current work?
Ooh, again, it was a process. Yeah, it was definitely a process, because like on Guam, I don't know if Hawaii's like that, but it's like Catholic dominant. So like being queer, being Guamanian, being Filipino, like I didn't have any term or way or people to even talk about it growing up. Definitely now it's a much more freeing experiences, because I've been able to obviously connect with a lot of my family and friends about certain experiences that that I wasn't able to when I was younger. But I feel like, yes, being queer, Islander, and Filipino is definitely an icebreaker, an icebreaker to conversations when I talk to people who are also queer. It is definitely a unique experience for sure. It's still an obstacle now, because when I do go back to Guam, I think I navigate spaces kind of differently, because I'm not sure how to like go back on Guam and be comfortable with me being in my queerness and my authenticity just yet. I think it's a lot of trauma still I'm trying to work over with that. But out here, I honestly feel like I'm very much more supported, and being queer and finding like a lot of queer philam spaces has helped me. Oh my gosh, shout out to my queer philam folks. They really helped me grow a lot of love for myself. I feel like queer spaces, honestly, like Pride Month and everything, but I love all my queers, and I definitely like is a space that everyone should experience, because it's just full of love and full of support. And I feel like, again, without like my recent queer like philan folks, it would definitely be a harder time to harder like experience to like accept my authenticity and my foundation and my being from Guam and being Filipino. So yeah, like it's still something I do navigate. I do find difficulty in navigating on like daily basis in some ways, but I'm very more comfortable because of like the community spaces that has showed up in my life. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Community is everything. I mean, if you find the community that you can be your most self, your most authentic self, and just, not having to actually navigate or, stepping on eggshells or anything like that, and finally finding that community goes a long way. And I'm so glad that you're able to find that where you are now. This makes a big difference. So yeah, shout out to the community that you found out there in San Diego.
Oh, thank you. I do want to just share, I think right now, I don't know if this is the right space or anything, but I feel like a lot of, I guess, queer folks show a lot of love to them right now. There's a lot of things that's going on in the community that it's going backwards for some reason. And like, I feel like there's a lot of fear in acceptance, and that's why there's a lot of pushback, because there's a lot of people who are change makers, queer activists, and like queer like people in general who are fighting for freedom, like and to express ourselves in different spaces. And there's a lot of fear in that. And I feel like I just want to share, like people should just love more. At the end of the day, like love should overcome hate. So like when in doubt, like you don't understand, just make kindness and love at the forefront of everything. If you don't understand, just lead with love. That's all I want to say. Like in anything you don't understand, like love that person just because they exist, and just because we all breathe the same air, we all live on a planet at the end of the day. So like just lead with love and lead with kindness. I think that's one thing I want to leave and share before like we get to the end.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. It's a good message. My final question, and it may be kind of similar to what you shared. I guess, what are your hopes for the future, and what legacy or what do you want to leave behind?
I think my hopes for the future is that I see youth, the youth right now, like to really continue pushing. I know there's a lot of, again, fear and confusion that's happening around different communities and around the planet, like from like climate change, climate justice, to like social just like climate justice, to like environmental justice, to like racial like inequities and all of that. Like I want to just like see the youth continue pushing love and pushing like their voice into the communities, and to continue being like the hope that they want to be in the world and the change they want to see in the world. So continue pushing positivity and love. I really want to see youth being empowered. So I really want to see that. And the legacy I want to leave is like, I don't know, I think the legacy I want to leave is like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just thinking about my dad, because my dad passed away last July, and like thinking about his legacy and like what legacy do I want to leave. And I think the legacy, oh my God, I'm getting emotional, but I think the legacy I want to leave is just like, like with me being here, like in all the things I did in whatever role, like I always like led with like compassion and love and understanding and wanting to leverage communities to become like the better version or the best version of themselves always. So I think I just want to leave like that legacy, if anything.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. I don't know, I just really want to appreciate that you thought about your dad when you thought about legacy. And so, he obviously made a very big impact on you. That as soon as I mentioned the question, that's the person you thought of, and that's amazing. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you for that question.
Well, that's all I have. I just really appreciate your time and really sharing and being open. Sometimes it's hard to share about yourself, so really appreciate you just being authentic and sharing a little bit more about yourself. And I told the folks that I met with the other day is like, there's so much that I didn't know about you and each of them that's like we could ask a ton more questions, and unfortunately we're like limited to the time that we have. But yeah, just love getting to know you a little more. And obviously doesn't end here. Our story's unfinished. There's always so much more to share later on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.